What's a declassified document that's so unbelievable it sounds fake? Operation Mincemeat. A dead British officer washes ashore Spain during WW2 with a briefcase of top secret documents handcuffed to his wrist. Spain is neutral, but as a fascist nation, supports Germany tacitly and allows them to photograph the documents before returning them to the British, so they continue to remain neutral. The documents detail an allied plan to launch a naval invasion of Greece and attack into Germany from the soft underbelly that is the Balkans and Hungary. The Germans eat the bait and the Axis move forces to defend against this front in Greece. However, this is where the Allies reveal their trap card and invade a much more poorly defended Sicily. The British officer was a random Welsh homeless person who had recently died, who was dressed up as a British officer, given a fully detailed set of papers and backstory, including love letters and a picture of a girlfriend, some fake papers in a briefcase, and dropped off the coast of Spain by submarine. The wreckage of the Titanic was found because the Navy was looking for the wreckage of 2 nuclear subs in the area. They staged the expedition as a private venture to find the Titanic to cover for the fact that they were actually looking for the submarines. They actually ended up finding all 3 wreckages, although they only reported on the Titanic at the time. Wasn't the guy they hired really interested in finding the Titanic and only took the job finding the subs to finance the hunt for the Titanic? If I recall, he made short work of the sub hunt and still found the Titanic quickly. Yeah. The Navy basically told him, "We are hiring you for a few months to find these subs, but if you finish early, go find the Titanic or something lol." So he finished early and found the Titanic. He's since responsible for finding like half of all major deep water wrecks. He actually considers his most important discovery to be hydrothermal vents, not any wreck, since he was one of the first divers to do research on them. There's a declassified CIA document about them interviewing people who claim to be able to astral project themselves onto Mars into underground alien cities or something. It was very in-depth, but I can't remember what it's called. Bat bombs were an experimental World War II weapon developed by the United States. The bomb consisted of a bomb-shaped casing with over 1,000 compartments, each containing a hibernating Mexican free-tailed bat with a small, timed incendiary bomb attached, dropped from a bomber at dawn. The casings would deploy a parachute in mid-flight and open to release the bats, which would then disperse and roost in eaves and attics in a 20-40 mile radius, 32 to 64 kilometers. The incendiaries, which were set on timers, would then ignite and start fires in inaccessible places in the largely wood and paper constructions of the Japanese cities that were the weapon's intended target. The United States Navy took control in August 1943, using the codename Project X-Ray. The US scrapped the project after beginning the Manhattan Project. It's crazy that this weapon was actually developed and would have been implemented had the US not developed nuclear weapons. Something like that was purported to have been done by Olga of Kiev. She laid siege to Icoristan for a year, unsuccessfully, then tried a crazy plan. She promised to end the siege if the Drevlians in the city gave her 3 pigeons/swallows from each house. They paid this price happily. To end the siege, she ordered a piece of burning sulfur on a cloth tied to each bird's foot, and then the birds released outside the city. They returned home to their roosts in the eaves of the city and spread fire. Icoristan was burned and promptly sacked. Some smarty pants weapons developer read a history book and figured he'd try out an old legend. Project A119 was a top secret study by the US government to predict the effects of detonating a nuclear warhead on the moon, big enough to be visible from Earth. They wanted to do this because they thought the Soviets would be doing something similar for the anniversary of the October Revolution. It didn't end up going ahead because the study, unsurprisingly, concluded that this was a terrible idea. 2 funny things about this. The Soviets were indeed doing a similar study that came to the same conclusion. The reason it was declassified is because one of the scientists working on this project was Carl Sagan. Sagan accidentally leaked the documents of this project after using it as evidence of his previous work when applying for a job years after project ended. Operation Midnight Climax and George Hunter White. If I remember correctly, the basics were that the CIA in the 1950s wanted to research the possibility of using LSD for mind control. Consultant George Hunter White was given the task, so he would host dinner parties in his New York apartment and dose pitchers of martinis with LSD without the knowledge of his guests, to see what would happen. One party girl later stumbled into a hospital, not knowing what was happening to her, and understandably thought she had gone insane, attempting to have herself committed. So things got too out of hand, and the CIA decided to pull back on the operation. White, who was apparently a big fan of alcohol and narcotics himself, moved the operation to San Francisco. He would hire prostitutes to dose their clients, while he watched the events unfold behind a two-way mirror. Apparently he also sat on a toilet the entire time, because he didn't want to miss a second of what transpired. The CIA's attempt to train cat spies. They tried to train cats to be spies by implanting recording equipment in their bodies and letting them loose near Soviet buildings. The cats could accurately travel short distances to targets, but the training didn't stick well enough for the cats to meet the CIA's eavesdropping needs. Program got shut down after a few millions of dollars worth of investment. Operation Northwoods, a plan by the US to attack its own military and civilians and blame it on Cuba to then use it as an excuse to invade Cuba, change Cuba for another country, and tell me if it sounds like a more recently conspiracy theory. The Finders Cult documents, a crazy amount of info released by the FBI about a cult with CIA ties back during the 80s. They abducted or otherwise obtained children that they sexually abused and made participate in ostensibly satanic rituals. Repeatedly evidence of child abuse or neglect was ignored, and testimony of FBI or customs agents being told to F off by CIA members are documented. The CIA did even admit to working with the cult, but only under the guise of computer training. The cult operated under the guise of one of those new age groups and suppositions that they were attempting to mold the kids into what they thought was a better form were put forth, swept under as just satanic panic, but was far from that. Phoenix Program. Guantanamo Bay torture techniques were developed by the CIA Vietnam Phoenix Program. The Guantanamo guards didn't come up with the enhanced interrogation by themselves. They were taught. Before Guantanamo Bay, the torture techniques were used in Latin America. The picture of the black hooded man, La Capuchi, standing on a boxing crucifix style with dangling wires was used in Latin America known as La Cámara after a captured Chilean women. There's an audio recording of Nixon talking to a guy from Kaiser Permanente about how they would dismantle the healthcare system. They even say something along the lines of, no, this isn't about providing more care, it's about providing less. Honestly, a lot of the Nixon audio recordings are messed up, like how the entire war on substances was just to target hippies and black people, both of whom are Nixon's political enemies cause they don't vote for him. 28-page documents showing Saudi Arabia funded a dry run of the 9/11 hijacking sequence in 1999. I think we also recently sold them $500 million in arms after their prince murdered a US journalist with a bone saw. They are considered our allies. I'd imagine Cultra has been said numerous times. What really stands out about the body of documentation we have available to us is not what is recorded so much as what is redacted. Vile things were done across numerous agencies and over a span of decades under the auspices of it or its successor projects. And yet, a ton of the FOIA and Cultra documents are heavily redacted, considering the monstrous nature of the behavior we know they engaged in. What the F is under all that black ink? In Canada, the treatment of abducted indigenous children away from their families and into residential schools was so harsh that the term residential school syndrome was invented to describe the PTSD suffered by the victims. Aside from the beatings, existential crisis perpetrated against children as young as 5, there was the question of unethical medical studies such as the deliberate starvation of 1,000 children to study malnutrition. I forget the name of the project, but I remember reading about a Cold War era concept for a weapon that was essentially a rocket with a nuclear engine, but instead of launching it into a target, the rocket would fly over an area and spew radiation all over it. Project Pluto. It was both a cruise missile which attacked multiple targets with nuclear warheads and then flew around spewing radiation until it crashed. It was cancelled for being way too provocative. Not really a document, but a civil court case. It was basically proven in civil court that MLK Jr. was assassinated by the CIA, FBI, and local Memphis police, and the ruling on the case affirmed that. So in a court of law, you have a unanimous decision that the CIA and FBI killed him, and almost no one knows this.